I knew I was screwed the minute Chase strutted into our Monday compliance review wearing loafers with no socks and said, "We're sunsetting the old guard." Sunsetting. Like I was a damn rotary phone. 2 decades of bulletproof regulatory reporting, gone with a smirk and a PowerPoint template he probably stole from LinkedIn. It was month end, which meant we were 2 weeks out from the Form 86B deadline, one tied to our chemical storage permits and air emissions compliance. The one that legally required a wet signature. Mine, not DocuSign, not Chase's Slack emoji high fives. But hey, Chase had a vision, and apparently that vision included firing the only person in the building who knew how to file that form without getting the Environmental Oversight Department breathing down our necks with hazmat suits and subpoenas. He called it a modernization initiative. We were overweight with legacy processes. I asked if he'd reviewed the last audit notes. He waved his hand like he was swatting a fly off his gluten-free lunchbox and said, "No need. We're agile now." Then, swear to God, he laughed and said, "Don't worry, Linda. We'll archive your Rolodex in the company museum. And listen, I get it, compliance ain't sexy. It's not salsa dancing in Mexico with the interns or pitching NFTs to confused investors. It's paper cuts, ink smudges, and binders thicker than Chase's sense of irony. But those binders mattered. They kept our name out of federal enforcement bulletins. They kept his bonus intact. By the way, quick break in the trauma. If you've listened this far and haven't hit that subscribe button, I got one thing to say: 97% of y'all are freeloading like Chase at a compliance meeting. Hit the button. Keeps the lights on and gives our team a reason not to cry into their keyboards. Anyway, back to the circus. Chase introduced himself at the all hands like he was auditioning for TED Talk. "Hi, I'm Chase. I believe in disruption, innovation, and breaking the rules that don't serve us anymore." The room clapped. Someone even wooed. Meanwhile, I was sitting there wondering which rule he planned to break first: chemical hazard storage or labor law. Within the week, he started calling me Legacy Linda in team meetings. Said it like it was a nickname, like we were on a sitcom. "Legacy Linda, do we really need to print those filings? Trees are dying." He'd chuckle. Everyone else laughed too, nervous, forced. They wanted to keep their jobs. I didn't blame them. But I knew what he didn't. Every single one of our annual filings was tied to a chain of custody, and that chain ended with my signature. Not a job title, not a department, me. It was my name on the EPA's internal whitelist. My fingerprint scanned into the Department of Environmental Oversight's legacy system, and if that filing wasn't submitted by a pre-cleared signatory, the whole operation risked getting flagged for federal audit. That meant delays, fines, and if they found even one missing hazard disclosure, maybe even criminal referrals. I said none of this. What I did do was open my desk drawer and start a fresh spiral notebook titled Insurance. I wrote the date. Then I wrote Chase referred to federal compliance as boomer paperwork in front of the interns, laughed when I corrected him, proceeded to delete legacy access credentials. I kept documenting. He started pushing for automation. "Arable this, Slack bot that. Let's get rid of these clunky binders," he announced one morning. I watched him drop a folder labeled MSDS formaldehyde into the shred bin like it was junk mail. I damn near screamed, but I didn't, I just wrote it down. The company, meanwhile, was too dazzled by his confidence. Chase spoke fast, quoted out-of-context startup articles, and name-dropped his MBA program like it was holy scripture. Everyone wanted to believe he was the future. Hell, maybe they were right, but I was the only one who remembered the past. Like the time in 2009, when we missed a carbon reporting deadline and spent 6 months groveling to regulators to avoid a $1 million fine. Chase wouldn't have lasted a week back then. But now, I was the dinosaur. The legacy expense. The woman who still printed things. The relic from an analog era that didn't match the company's glossy new website or Chase's enthusiasm for Slack emojis. So I waited, and I documented. Because if there's one thing old ladies like me know how to do, it's track paper trails. Even when the paper's digital. Especially then. It happened on a Friday like most betrayals do. Sun was setting, inbox was quiet, and Chase strutted into the conference room like a rooster who just learned how to use a clicker. He had that smug MBA grin on, teeth so white they could trigger migraines. A printed agenda titled Q3 Optimization Adjustments. Translation: layoffs but with a Canva template. There was no preamble, no throat-clearing HR rep with a tissue box and a laminated pamphlet on next steps. Just Chase, a cold can of sparkling water, and an expression that said he was about to do something revolutionary. "Linda," he said, like we were old drinking buddies, "this is hard, but we're making strategic decisions for future growth. Your role is being sunset for operational efficiency." Sunset, again with the sunset. I braced myself for the punchline, and there it came. "Let's be honest, it's just dead weight. We're not running a museum." The sentence landed like a slap made of smog and printer toner. Not because I hadn't expected it, I had, but because he said it with that smile. That condescending, frat boy smile people wear when they think they've said something smart and edgy. I stared at him, silent, not because I was stunned, because I was choosing not to torch the room. Chase mistook the silence for surrender. He stood up, tossed a manila envelope across the table, and said, "Exit packet. There's a 2-week severance in there. You've got an hour to pack up." Then he turned and strutted out, already typing something on his phone, probably updating Slack with a celebratory emoji. By the time I got to my desk, the whispering had already begun. Could smell the cowardice in the air, burnt popcorn and guilt. The interns avoided eye contact like I had Ebola. My inbox pinged with a subject line. "Thank you for your service, best wishes," from Chase. He'd BCC'd the whole company. I was still reading it when Greg from HR stumbled over. Poor guy looked like a cat trying to walk across a hot grill. "I didn't know this was happening today," he muttered. "I thought we were doing a formal offboarding next week." "Not your fault," I said, folding my laptop. He skipped protocol. "Efficient, right?" Greg nodded sheepish. "We can offer you a sit-down to discuss." "No need," I said, slipping the 2 binders marked compliance signed originals into my tote bag. "I'm already clear on where this is headed." I took my time packing up. Chase was in a meeting room across the floor, glass walls and all, bragging to the marketing team. I watched him pantomime something, arms wide like Moses parting the Red Sea. Everyone laughed. No one looked toward me, except Anna, the receptionist. She mouthed, "I'm sorry," and I nodded once. That was enough. No one noticed when I logged into the third-party compliance system and removed my biometric access. No one noticed when I slid my old brass key into a drawer labeled Regulatory Archive and relabeled it closed. No one noticed that on the corner of my monitor, I left a sticky note that said, "You'll want to call the EPA in 8 days. No fireworks, no scene, just quiet." You'd think after 20 years they'd have given me a goodbye lunch, a card, even a sad slice of sheet cake in the break room. But no, all I got was an empty desk, a recycled box, and Chase whispering to a junior dev, "Boomers don't get sarcasm." I did hear one thing that made me pause. As I was wheeling my box past the kitchenette, I overheard Chase saying, "She probably thinks we need her to file stuff. It's all digital now, dude," and I almost laughed. I almost turned around, looked him in the eye, and explained exactly what kind of paper trail he just erased. But I didn't, because Chase didn't deserve an explanation. He deserved the fallout, so I looked him in the eye, smiled the same way my mother used to smile before lighting her ex's clothes on fire, and said, "Okay." Then I left, and let the countdown begin. The elevator ride down was silent except for the whir of the box wheels and the faint crackle of the fluorescent lights, both of which somehow sounded smug. I felt like I was being exorcised, rolled out like a cursed relic while the office held its breath, hoping I wouldn't make a scene or, worse, cry. But I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I made it to the parking garage before the rage started to rise. Not loud, not messy, just hot and clean like brake fluid on skin. The kind of rage that doesn't throw punches but writes them into forms and filings and audits. The kind that knows where the bodies are buried because she was the one who kept the burial records on file, in triplicate, cross-referenced by hazard type. Back upstairs, while Chase played Silicon Savior in the glass-walled fishbowl, I was methodically reclaiming my dignity. One by one, I packed everything. My favorite pen, the one with the missing clip and ink stains. My backup reading glasses. The peppermint tin with a thumb drive tucked under the mints labeled Vendor Contracts Archive. And then, from the bottom drawer, I pulled out the 2 binders. Thick, black, unassuming. Labels typed neatly, compliance filings signed originals. Nobody asked what they were, nobody dared. I placed them gently in the box, not hidden, not flaunted. Just there in plain sight, like a loaded weapon nobody recognized. That's when Chase sauntered by again, sipping something green from a mason jar like he was auditioning for a reboot of Entourage. He didn't even stop, just smirked and tossed over his shoulder, "Don't forget your Rolodex." I smiled, tight-lipped, not because it was funny, but because he just cemented his own doom. The Rolodex was gone years ago. What wasn't gone? The fact that the federal regulatory system still required physical documentation of certain certifications. Certifications I had handled exclusively, because the last time the company tried to outsource compliance, we got hit with a 6-month freeze on shipping hazardous goods. I remembered. Chase didn't. I logged into the third-party certification platform from my desktop, my final act. 2-factor authentication, fingerprint scan, and a security question only I knew the answer to. "What was your first filing code?" "F1986A. I typed it, hit enter, and the admin panel blinked open. There, glowing like a lit fuse, was the annual filing dashboard. I revoked my credentials. And just like that, their only authorized agent for Federal Form 86B filings ceased to exist in the system. It wasn't malicious. It was policy. My departure required deactivation. No one else could reauthorize without biometric revalidation, which took, drumroll please, 10 business days. Coincidentally, that's how long they had before the deadline. I left my monitor on just to be poetic, displaying the countdown clock the platform used to track submission windows. 192 hours, 14 minutes, tick, tock. Then I scribbled a note. Not a manifesto, not a rant, just one yellow sticky. Place center screen. You'll want to call the EPA in 8 days. No signature. I unplugged my charger, took one last look at my cubicle, home to 2 decades of ignored warnings and overachieved audits, and wheeled my box toward the elevator. Chase was still in the meeting room, gesturing like a magician. Through the glass, I saw him high-five a junior associate. Someone had put up a goodbye legacy Linda meme on Slack, complete with a tombstone emoji. I chuckled, not because it was funny, because they had no idea what legacy really meant. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I pictured the look on his face, not now, not tomorrow, but in exactly 8 days, when the inbox would ding with an overdue filing notice, when the phone would ring with a compliance inquiry, when legal would start sweating and the board would start asking questions, and when all roads, inevitably, would point back to me. Dead weight, huh? Funny thing about dead weight, it sinks fast, especially when you toss it overboard without checking if it was holding the hull together. The next Monday, while Chase was busy turning Airtable into his personal shrine of pastel-colored grids and emoji-labeled tabs, I was wrist-deep in soil, planting heirloom tomatoes, and wondering how long it would take before someone noticed the silence. Spoiler, they didn't. Chase called it streamlining the legacy process, said it in a company-wide email like he'd just reinvented oxygen. We've moved all compliance workflows into a modern cloud-based solution to better align with our agile strategy, he wrote. Translation: he built a spreadsheet, slapped the word workflow on it, and assigned random people to boxes they didn't understand. There were tabs for Q3 filings, hazard map, EPA stuff. I kid you not, that was the actual tab name. My personal favorite, signatures optional. Because nothing screams regulatory integrity like optional signatures. Meanwhile, back in the real world, the Department of Environmental Oversight doesn't give a damn about Airtable. What they do care about is whether Form 86B is submitted on time, signed by a pre-approved agent, and physically archived in accordance with Section 9C of the Federal Hazardous Materials Reporting Act. Not a digital checkmark, not a Slack thread titled "looks good to me." A pen, a date, a real goddamn signature, but none of them knew that. The compliance bot Chase installed sent cheerful reminders like, "Don't forget to submit your forms by EOW," followed by gifs of cats high-fiving. Nothing in the system even checked for the signature field because Chase had removed it, said it was clutter. And I didn't so much as lift a finger. I sat on my back porch in cargo shorts and a faded company hoodie, sipping sweet tea and listening to the birds shit on the roof. I trimmed basil, mulched the beds, sharpened my garden shears to a lethal shine. When the mail arrived, I sorted it slowly, like a woman with nowhere to be and nothing to prove. Some mornings I'd glance at my phone and see old coworkers resharing Chase's motivational quotes on LinkedIn. Good leaders don't ask for signatures, ask for solutions. One post had 48 likes and a comment from a junior manager, loving the new era of innovation. Sure you are, kid. On day 4, I opened the news and checked the department's press release page. Quiet. On day 5, I checked the filing portal, public access. Our company's Form 86B wasn't listed, not filed, not pending, not even started. Perfect. I turned off notifications and returned to pruning my hydrangeas. Blue ones this year, they like the acidic soil better. I hummed a little as I worked. Something from the 70s, a song my dad used to sing under his breath while fixing the carburetor. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. Day 6, nothing. Day 7, still nothing. Chase, I imagined, was giving himself digital high fives. Probably felt like a tech pioneer, disrupting decades of inefficiency with a few drop-down menus and a Canva-styled PDF. Meanwhile, filing system ticked toward 0. The signature line required by law sat blank, untouched, forgotten, just as planned, and in the quiet space of those days between weeding and watering, between coffee sips and soft chuckles, I realized I didn't feel anger anymore. Just distance, a cool, clear detachment. The kind you feel after narrowly avoiding a car crash on black ice. You sit there afterward, gripping the wheel, heart slowing, and think, I lived. But damn, that was close. That's what working under Chase had become. A 2-year skid toward disaster disguised as growth. Now, I just waited, letting gravity do the work, no pushing, no plotting. Just silence and time, because the beautiful thing about regulatory systems, they don't forget, they don't forgive, and they sure as hell don't negotiate with Airtable. Day 9. I was in the garage sharpening my shears when the call came. Blocked number, which normally meant either a scammer or my ex-husband's new girlfriend trying to clear the air again. But I answered anyway, wiping dirt off my hands with the same towel I used to clean carburetors. Linda, a voice said, shaky but familiar. Hey, Kelly, I said, slipping into a lawn chair. Still surviving finance? There was a pause, then barely above a whisper. You were the compliance signatory, right? Now that got my attention. I said nothing. Just listened as she continued, voice lowering like she was narrating a true crime podcast. We just got a letter from the Department of Environmental Oversight. Something about Form 86B being missing, and unverified. It was marked urgent, like all caps urgent. Still, I said nothing. Let the silence stretch just enough to make her nervous. I mean, she stammered, you always handled those, right? Chase told us you had it all set up to autopilot. I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that was the exact moment the Jenga tower started to wobble. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through screenshots I'd saved. Ah, there it was. Chase's now immortal Slack message posted in the #Ops Innovation channel. Don't worry, that old bat had everything on autopilot. We're just cleaning it up, smiling face with sunglasses. God bless emojis. They make screenshots so much more damning. I didn't confirm anything to Kelly, just said forward me a copy of the letter. For my records. She hesitated, finance is trained not to leak, but I reminded her I still had copies of the vendor licensing schedules she'd bungled in Q1. The attachment came through 2 minutes later. Department of Environmental Oversight failure to file Form 86B, immediate action required. Failure to comply may result in fines of up to $5 million, suspension of permits. Mandatory audits, $5 million. For form that takes 30 minutes to prepare, 1 minute to sign, and 10 years to understand the consequences of ignoring. I made myself some tea, real slow, sat on the porch swing and watched a squirrel dig up one of my basil plants like he was looking for evidence. Then I opened my laptop, new folder, labeled it insurance in all caps, just like the government's letter. First file, the Slack screenshot. Second file, my termination letter, signed by Chase, dated exactly 9 days before the Form 86B deadline. Third, an email from legal 6 months back thanking me for personally ensuring compliance consistency year over year. Fourth, a calendar export showing my biometric renewal scheduled annually every April. Fifth, a printout of the department's digital filing log. No submission, no signatory, just an empty row. And then, just for the poetry, I threw in a photo of the sticky note I'd left on my monitor. You'll want to call the EPA in 8 days. I wasn't sending anything yet. Not to the board, not to the media, not even to my lawyer. No, this was still the quiet part, the prelude, but make no mistake, I was setting the table. And Chase was the main course. He was out there somewhere, probably feeling invincible, probably still drinking green sludge out of mason jars and patting himself on the back for streamlining compliance. And I sat there, sipping my tea, imagining the moment he'd read that letter, the blood draining from his face. The slow, creeping horror of realizing the old bat didn't leave behind a mess. She took the manual with her and locked the door on the way out. Satisfaction doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes with Gmail drafts, color-coded folders, and a squirrel tearing up your herb garden like he's staging a tiny protest. I let him. Hell, I even gave him a peanut, because some chaos is worth feeding. It hit the company like a mortar shell on a Monday morning. The formal notice arrived via certified mail and email, subject line all uppercase, no emojis this time. Notice of Penalty Form 86B Noncompliance pursuant to Section 9C of the Federal Hazardous Materials Reporting Act. Your organization is subject to a preliminary penalty of $5 million pending full audit and regulatory review. Immediate response required. The kind of email that makes executives choke on their oat milk. By 9:17 a.m., every glass-walled office was lit up like a Christmas tree in hell. Conference rooms filled. Calendars auto-populated with emergency compliance review. Someone even pulled the blinds on the break room, like the smell of liability couldn't pass through a Keurig machine. Chase scheduled a mandatory company-wide Zoom at noon. He opened it with that same too-casual tone he'd used the day he fired me. Except now his voice had a tightness in it, a tremble barely hidden under his usual buzzwords. Hey everyone, look, this is just a temporary hiccup. We've received a notice from the Department of Environmental Oversight regarding a missed filing. We're addressing it, and I want to assure you that it stems from an outdated process that we've already moved away from. Outdated process. As if the process had mailed itself to Washington with a blank page and a middle finger stapled to it. Chase smiled, wide but off. You could see the sheen of panic sweating through his Patagonia knockoff. Cheap fabric doesn't hide a man unraveling. A few people nodded politely. Most just looked at their keyboards, silently calculating how close their name was to this particular fire. Then the VP of Legal unmuted. Her voice didn't shake. Her camera didn't flicker. She leaned into the mic like she'd been waiting her whole career for this question. Who had federal filing authority? Boom. The silence that followed could have dropped a satellite. Chase blinked, swallowed. His eyes darted off camera, probably toward a half-finished arable tab titled something useless like Compliance Light or Forms in Progress Raising Hands. He stammered something about shared ownership and transition periods and institutional knowledge gaps. But the VP just repeated, slower this time, who had filing authority? By 3:00 p.m., legal had compiled a preliminary timeline, and it didn't look good. I wasn't in the building, obviously, but I imagined it like a crime scene. Cubicles cordoned off, printers silent, everyone tiptoeing through their inboxes looking for anything that might link them to the dead filing. Someone must have panicked because HR called me. 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. Each one more desperate than the last. Hi Linda, this is Tanya from HR. Just wanted to touch base, Linda. We really need to speak with you urgently. Just to get a sense of your role, please call us back. We'd like to make this right. Make this right? As if you could glue a filing signature back onto a voided form like a paper doll. I didn't call back. Instead, I watched the clouds roll in over the backyard. The hydrangeas were finally blooming. The blue ones had deepened into that kind of electric midnight hue you only get from well-acidified soil. I smiled. The news hadn't broken yet, but it would. A $5 million fine makes headlines, especially when it involves hazardous materials and a company that thought Arable could replace a legal filing system. The best part? I hadn't done anything. No sabotage, no whistleblowing, no call to the feds, just nothing. A vacuum. And into that vacuum rushed all the panic, all the scrambling, although we thought she was just the paperwork lady chaos that they'd earned with every smirk and every dismissal. Chase, for all his swagger and smoothies and disruptive energy, had just realized the truth. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the quiet one you fired without reading her job description. I sipped my tea, let the voicemails pile up, let the silence do the talking. It took less than 24 hours after the penalty notice for the emails to start leaking upward. Not across the company, upward, straight to the boardroom. The place Chase thought he'd be invited into with applause and stock options. Instead, the director started sniffing out liability like bloodhounds at a crime scene. $5 million tends to rattle even the most spreadsheet-hardened suits. Midweek, 7:41 p.m., I got the message. Sent from a private Gmail address with no subject line, just one line of text. Linda, I'd appreciate any clarity you can offer. Discretion guaranteed. Signed, initials only. But I recognized the name, Christopher J. Miles, one of the board's longest-standing members. Old school, not flashy. Still sent Christmas cards. He once told me my handwriting was neater than legal's red lines. I didn't answer right away. I let it marinate overnight like a good pot roast. Then, with the calm of a woman who's already planted her fall herbs and labeled the canning jars, I sent him one PDF. That's it. No commentary, no threats, no as you'll see attached. Just a document titled, Internal Policy Memo Federal Compliance Signatory Authority, dated March 4, 2017. Signed by the CEO, 2 VPs, and me. Highlighted, all federal compliance filings must be signed by Linda A. Mercer, Director of Regulatory Affairs. No delegation or proxy permitted. I didn't need to say a word, because while Chase was tap dancing through excuses like institutional drift and automation transition phases, the board now had black and white proof that no one, had the right to submit those filings except me. And someone had, because the department, bless their bureaucratic hearts, had begun cross-checking signature logs. See, even digital filings have trails, IP addresses, timestamps, metadata. Especially when you're dealing with federal documents. Wouldn't you know it, the last-minute Form 86B upload from Regulatory Ops was missing biometric verification, but not a signature. A typed name, Linda Mercer. Falsified, filed after my termination date. And Chase? Chase was unraveling faster than a polyester suit in a wood chipper. Witnesses said he started working late, locked his office, shouted our junior analyst for not being proactive. HR filed a complaint after he slammed a chair into a wall during a meeting. By Friday, he'd reportedly snapped at the VP of Legal. This isn't a firing offense, it's a system glitch. Legal didn't reply. They just slid a packet across the table labeled Whistleblower Protocol. I hadn't said a word to the press. Hadn't posted so much as a LinkedIn status. But I did make one call. My lawyer picked up on the first ring. It's time, I said. She didn't ask what I meant. We'd prepared for this. I'd already compiled the email chain, the Slack logs, the termination letter, the memo, and the original Form 86B drafts, all timestamped, all neat as hell. I sent her a thumb drive via overnight courier. Inside the envelope, a note to be opened in case of public statement. I sealed it, kissed it for luck, dropped it into the FedEx box like a love letter to karma. Then I turned off my phone and baked a lemon cake from scratch. Not out of celebration yet, but because lemon cake is best served cold, like revenge, like subpoenas, like the look I imagined on Chase's face when he realized his optional signature tab was about to become Exhibit A, and me, I was already 3 steps ahead. Calm, composed. Like a woman who built the house, left the keys under the mat, and watched from the garden while the new tenant tried to burn it down with a scented candle. They placed Chase on leave that Monday. Not officially fired, God forbid they tarnish the Golden Boy's resume too directly, but administrative leave pending internal review. Corporate for, please disappear before the feds ask too many questions. His LinkedIn changed 2 days later. The headline now read, Open to Work Driving Innovation Through Disruption, and below it, vague declaration, excited for the next chapter. Grateful for the lessons learned. No mention of the $5 million fine. No mention of falsified signatures. No mention of the woman he'd called dead weight while stripping my authority like it was a used cable bill. Just hashtags. #leadership, #agile thinking, #compliance matters. I snorted so hard I nearly choked on my tea. Meanwhile, the CEO, who hadn't said a damn word during any of this, finally emerged from whatever mahogany-paneled crypt they'd been hiding in and gave a statement at the quarterly investor call. Not to apologize. Not to admit failure. Just to smooth the turbulence with vague fluff. Recent events have highlighted the importance of respecting institutional knowledge, he said, solemn as a priest reading a spreadsheet. We're committed to rebuilding our compliance integrity and learning from this experience. Learning. Like this was a pop quiz and not a public paddling by the federal government. But then something happened that actually made me pause. A delivery truck pulled into my driveway. Old guy with a clipboard and a bouquet of white lilies and soft blue irises, expensive, tasteful, tied with a navy ribbon, no logo, just a small card tucked inside. The handwriting was tight and slanted, clearly done in a rush we didn't know. Now we do, see. Miles, I stood there a long time, just holding it. The flowers smelled like apologies and boardroom regret. I didn't smile, but I didn't throw them out either. Instead, I placed them by the window. Let the light hit them. Let the truth of it sink in. They finally understood what I had been. Not a clog in the system, not a dusty filing cabinet with legs. I was the system, the lock, the key, the insurance policy they never read until the fire started licking the curtains. And now the fire was spreading. Media got wind by Thursday. Just a whisper in the finance blogs at first, something about a mid-size industrial firm under federal audit for missing environmental filings. But it picked up speed when someone leaked part of the memo. My name wasn't in it, but it wasn't hard to figure out. An old colleague pinged me, saw the article. "Damn, you okay?" I replied, thriving. They said a few reporters had been calling the company asking about legacy process failure. One journalist apparently got a copy of Chase's Slack message about me. Yes, that one. And had already emailed the Department of Environmental Oversight for confirmation. So now legal was in damage control, trying to contain the narrative. You can't spin this kind of thing with talking points and free tote bags. Not when your entire compliance framework just collapsed because some tech bro with a superiority complex thought federal filings could be automated with drop-down menus and positive vibes. The real kicker? I heard through the grapevine that the board was considering reinstating the Director of Regulatory Affairs role. But now it was going to be a VP-level position. Double the salary, full autonomy. Guess legacy has a price tag after all. I didn't reach out, didn't gloat, didn't post on social media, didn't leak a damn thing. But I did forward the bouquet photo to my lawyer with the subject line. For the file, the flowers are nice. I'll take a check next time because this wasn't closure. Not yet. The final nail hadn't hit. The audit was still coming. And the real storm, it was just offshore. It came down hard and fast. 1 week to the day after the board got the memo and legal stopped pretending everything was under review. The department made it official. $5 million fine, regulatory negligence, failure to file mandatory hazardous material disclosures. The words weren't just ink on a government letterhead, they were an obituary. And the cause of death, arrogance in a blazer and no socks. The company released a limp press statement filled with legal fog. We acknowledge the seriousness of this oversight and are cooperating fully with regulators. No apology, no admission, just corporate throat clearing. But the media didn't buy it. The headlines wrote themselves. Startup exec's modernization plan ends in federal sanction. Compliance cutbacks lead to catastrophic fine. Fired director's signature absence costs firm millions. The last one made me laugh out loud. Signature absence. That's poetic justice with a ballpoint pen. Then came the photo. A former colleague, one of the few who hadn't sold their spine for a standing desk and free La Croix, sent it via encrypted text. No words, just the image. Chase, outside the office. Brown cardboard box in hand, half a monitor sticking out the side. Jacket slung over his shoulder like it weighed more than the consequences he'd ignored. His hair, which always looked too carefully tousled, now limp and defeated. Head down. Alone. No crowd, no sympathy. Just a man who learned too late that you can't disrupt federal law. Later that day, an internal memo leaked. Someone from IT probably. Bless their nosy little hearts. I didn't even have to go looking for it. It showed up in my inbox from 3 different people within the hour. Effective immediately, all regulatory compliance matters will be overseen by senior staff with proven federal experience. Proven. As in, not Chase. Not someone who thought Slack could substitute for legal counsel. Then came the call. It was late afternoon, sun pouring across my kitchen counter, turning my basil plant into a tiny green spotlight. I just poured a second cup of coffee when the phone rang. Number I didn't recognize, but local area code. "Hi, this is Rachel," the voice said. "I'm with Cormorant Industries, Regulatory Division. We've been following the us situation at your former employer. We'd love to talk if you're open to consulting or perhaps something more permanent." I smiled. Not because I needed the job, I didn't, but because of what it meant. Chase may have thrown me out like expired toner, but the industry still remembered what competence looked like. What legacy actually meant. "Let me think about it," I said, which is polite speak for you'll be hearing from my lawyer. After the call, I sat quietly for a while. The air was still. Even the neighborhood squirrels were taking the day off. Then I noticed a familiar envelope in the pile of mail by the door. Government issue, IRS logo. I frowned, opened it. Turns out Chase never updated the company's records when he took over. The letter was addressed to him, but mailed to my home, still listed as the compliance address of record. His name, his tax ID, a gentle little notice about unreported reimbursements and a scheduled audit. For a moment, I just stared at it, The irony was so rich I nearly licked the envelope. Then, slowly, deliberately, I fed it into the shredder. Let it whir and grind like a victory parade. Legacy expense, I muttered, chuckling to myself. Then I took another sip of coffee. Still hot, still strong, just like me. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.